In the eye of a storm engulfing the United Kingdom, from London newspapers spreading sensational news across the capital to major national television channels, something extraordinary unfolded. A rare interview with Princess Anne for the National became a genuine revelation, instantly captivating millions. Meanwhile, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle found themselves at the center of an unprecedented scandal, their names linked to an arrest following the unraveling of a truly shocking blackmail conspiracy. According to leaked media reports, their involvement became evident after the discovery of stolen secret royal documents, papers that, under no circumstances, should have ever seen the light of day. For the first time in a long while, when silence seemed unbreakable, Princess Anne, Prince William, and King Charles III himself made the momentous decision to break it, to tell their version of events. Their revelations, filled with unspeakable emotion and deep pain, could forever alter the fate of the entire royal family, rewriting its history. Viewers are in for a gripping dive into a world of secrets and intrigues, poised to uncover the long-hidden chaos and crisis unfolding behind the majestic palace walls. This dramatic story began discreetly, without grand announcements or scandalous scenes, but with a quiet hint that something was amiss. One foggy Windsor morning, precisely at 6 a.m., a junior royal aide entered a secure room designated for internal communications. Inside, she noticed a disturbing message, blinking red on an old, rarely used system. The message indicated an archive access request and originated from a device that hadn't been used in over 2 years. It was like a ghost from the past, a whisper from long-forgotten time. Most people would likely have dismissed it as a technical error or an outdated equipment malfunction. But this aide was different. She had meticulously studied the royal systems and understood their importance, their unshakable role in preserving centuries-old secrets. So, she acted without hesitation, with a determination worthy of the best detective. Less than half an hour later, she reported the incident to Princess Anne. By lunchtime, the Queen's only daughter had uncovered the beginning of something so serious it could tear the royal family apart, exposing its most intimate wounds. What exactly did she discover? What secrets, hidden for centuries, do the royal archives conceal? The answers to these questions could shake the world to its core, changing the familiar perception of the monarchy. The subsequent events defied imagination, surpassing the wildest assumptions. The real possibility of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's arrest on charges of blackmailing the royal family, using confidential information extracted from the royal archives, was discussed. However, to understand the underlying context, to grasp the true motives and hidden mechanisms, one must look to the backstory, to the events that led to the current upheaval. For many months, faint rumors and quiet whispers had circulated. Within the walls of Buckingham Palace, discussions revolved around missing documents, escalating tension among palace staff, and the conspicuous silence of high-ranking members of the royal family. After the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, King Charles III ascended the throne, and outwardly, everything appeared stable and orderly. However, behind the palace's grand facades, the situation was far from serene. According to some insiders, the crisis began with the release of Prince Harry's memoirs. Others believed the uproar surrounding the couple's Netflix and Spotify contracts was the cause. Undeniably, incessant press attention did not help resolve the situation. Nevertheless, these events were merely the tip of the iceberg. The true damage was inflicted subtly, through private messages, encrypted emails, and suspicious attempts to infiltrate secure royal networks. Few palace residents were skilled enough to notice these digital footprints, and even fewer were capable of tracking them. The princess, however, was not merely a ceremonial figure. Over her years of service, she had earned a reputation as an energetic and decisive individual, genuinely devoted to protecting her family's legacy. She was not one to ignore unsettling omens. During her further investigation, classified electronic correspondence caught her attention. These messages discuss carefully guarded royal family secrets, personal records, and private negotiations with influential media moguls from around the globe. Recognizing the sensitivity and immense destructive potential of the data obtained, she decided not to involve the palace's technical staff. Instead, in an atmosphere of strict secrecy, she contacted an independent cybersecurity agency, tasking them with a comprehensive investigation. The results presented by the experts left her deeply shocked and grieved. The experts managed to trace the origin of several emails that appeared to be directly linked to online accounts belonging to Prince Harry. These messages contain fragmented but highly revealing phrases, hinting at the existence of a meticulously planned and veiled scheme. Among them, expressions like, "They will be forced to yield once this is publicly known," and "The folder contains all necessary materials, and we await news from Los Angeles," stood out. As new pages of evidence unfolded, a terrifying picture of betrayal gradually emerged before the specialists' eyes. It became clear that an individual had gained access to top-secret royal information and was preparing to use it as a powerful lever. The apparent goal of this maneuver was to compel certain actions, force the disclosure of certain facts, or even carry out an act of retribution. Events rapidly escalated beyond a typical internal family conflict, taking on the magnitude of a potential scandal capable of inflicting irreparable damage to the monarchy's reputation, severing long-standing family ties, and even leading to serious legal consequences. At the very heart of this unfolding drama was the princess, known for her loyalty and integrity, who refused to turn a blind eye to the troubling facts. Initially, the princess adamantly refused to believe the information presented. Harry, the boy she had watched grow up, the young man she had actively supported in his defiance of strict royal conventions, could not be involved in such a thing. The princess's heart firmly rejected the very thought of his possible participation in such a base scheme. However, as she delved deeper into the details and analyzed the evidence, she bitterly realized that this was not a random error or a ridiculous delusion, but a meticulously planned scheme executed by someone who fully understood the consequences of their actions. This bitter yet undeniable truth gave her the resolve to act. Gathering all available evidence and documents, the princess went directly to King Charles III. It was a trial no father would wish upon himself. Reading documents indicating his own son's possible involvement in manipulation and intrigue within the royal tomb. Family. Meghan, his daughter-in-law, once welcomed into the family with open arms, was now suspected of complicity in this sinister plot. The palace had already endured many upheavals: the Queen's sorrowful passing, incessant and often caustic press coverage, and years of strained family relations. But this time it was about betrayal originating from the very heart of the family, making the situation particularly painful and dangerous for the entire monarchy. In the ensuing deafening silence, the king remained impassive, his face expressionless, like a carved mask. However, Prince William, who had long been plagued by suspicions regarding his brother's decisions, could not conceal the storm of emotions raging within him. His jaw tightened, his hands involuntarily clenched into fists, and his breathing visibly quickened, betraying his inner turmoil. He had always felt that Harry and Meghan's sudden and dramatic departure from royal life was more than just an emotional impulse. The move seemed too organized and swift to be merely a spontaneous decision. 2 days later, a secluded meeting was held within the walls of Balmoral Castle, attended only by an Isburney circle: the princess, King Charles III, Prince William, and top security officials. Behind tightly closed doors, away from any prying eyes, they meticulously examined the entire body of collected evidence. It wasn't just about digital footprints left online. There were witnesses who had personally observed certain events, old video recordings retrieved from the Royal Security System archives, and voice messages recovered from secret cloud storage. All these materials formed a disturbing and ominous picture. An unknown perpetrator had meticulously accumulated confidential information about members of the royal family, preparing to use it as leverage. Some of this compromising material concerned the late Queen, while other parts related to living members of the family. It was evident that these documents were under no circumstances intended for the public. Among them were personal letters from Prince Philip, protocols of secret family meetings convened in emergency situations, and statements that never saw the light of day. If any of this had become public, The blow to the royal family's reputation would have been devastating, and the consequences unpredictable. In the quarters, persistent rumors circulated about a sinister ultimatum issued by Prince Harry. If Buckingham Palace did not apologize for the perceived bias against Meghan Markle, certain secret archives might be made public. In response to the lack of reaction, targeted leaks of information began to seep into the media, resembling a carefully planned and orchestrated operation. However, it soon became clear that this was not merely an act of seeking justice or truth. It was about a much larger game, a struggle for power, control over public opinion, the distortion of information, and its use to redistribute influence. To an outsider, it looked not like an emotional outburst, but a meticulously calculated strategic campaign, a high-stakes game where not only family ties, but also the monarchy's reputation were on the line. The palace, deeply aware of the gravity of the situation, decided to act not only cautiously, but with unwavering determination. Without any prior public notification, the royal legal team sent a strictly confidential dossier to the Crown Prosecution Service. At this time, Meghan and Harry were out of the country, actively participating in a charity event in Canada. However, as their private jet departed back towards London, it was unexpectedly detained directly on the tarmac at Heathrow Airport. The order for detention came from a high-ranking official. Soon, plainclothes officers boarded the aircraft, immediately escorting the Duke and Duchess for questioning. By sunrise, the headlines of every newspaper screamed sensational news. Harry and Meghan were at the epicenter of an unprecedented royal investigation related to mysterious palace secret documents. In cyberspace, a storm of public outrage instantly erupted. Popular hashtags calling for justice spread like wildfire across the network. All kinds of speculation, rumors, and irreconcilable contradictions flooded news feeds. Leading television channels covered every new development nonstop. Invited experts and analysts engaged in lively, sometimes heated, discussions live on air. Previously dismissed staff rushed to share details known to them, fueling the fire of the scandal. Persistent paparazzi besieged every palace exit, eager to capture every detail. This incident was not just another scandalous rumor or a minor family disagreement. It delivered a devastating blow to the deep trust that once served as the unshakable foundation of the royal family. Such treachery was perceived not merely as a personal slight, but as something audacious, almost unimaginable in its brazenness. A bleeding wound had formed, and the entire world, holding its breath, watched mesmerized as it developed and deepened. At the heart of the unfolding drama were the princess, who chose not to silence the truth, no matter what. The king, tormented by deep emotional pain and an overwhelming sense of responsibility for the monarchy. William, forced to bear the heavy burden of family duty and personal anger. And Meghan, a woman whose ambitious aspirations may have crossed all permissible boundaries. As events rapidly unfolded, new arrests followed, and the truth gradually began to emerge, as if breaking through a thick veil of secrecy. The global community could no longer remain aloof from what was happening, riveted to every turn of this story. All without exception yearned to know to what extremes individuals were willing to go for complete control over their own history and its narrative. And if they crossed the line, could they ever return to their former lives, restore lost connections and reputations? In anticipation of the impending large-scale upheavals, the external atmosphere seemed to exude serenity. However, behind the carefully constructed facade of well-being, within the depths of the royal family, a fierce struggle to preserve an elusive legacy was unfolding. Now, the previously hidden cracks were exposed to the intense scrutiny of the general public. In the eyes of ordinary people, daily royal life proceeded as usual. King Charles III, radiant with a smile, posed against the backdrop of exquisite masterpieces in the famous Vienna Gallery. Prince William and Princess Catherine, constantly appearing in news publications, shared their infectious laughter with young readers at a lively school event. Even Princess Anne, the embodiment of calm and grace, was captured gently feeding horses at the picturesque Balmoral estate. These moments, masterfully captured by countless cameras, were not mere random episodes. They were carefully staged scenes, designed to create an illusion of an unbreakable peace and absolute immutability. But behind the impregnable palace walls, a completely different drama was unfolding. Tension escalated at an alarming rate. High-ranking staff ceased open communication, resorting to subtle glances, restrained nods, and swift changes in work schedules. Meetings became fleeting, as key issues were discussed exclusively in private correspondence, away from prying ears. A serious crisis was brewing behind the scenes, but no one dared to voice it aloud. Little more than 3 years had passed since Prince Harry and Meghan stunned the world with their daring and unprecedented decision to step back from their duties as working members of the royal family. Their act could not be called a modest retreat into the shadows. Rather, it was a bold declaration of complete independence. They crossed the vast ocean, settling on another continent in search of personal freedom. Yet they expressed a clear desire to retain their royal titles, a truly unprecedented step in the monarchy's centuries-old history. Initially, it might have seemed that the couple merely sought some autonomy and privacy from public life. However, over time, it became abundantly clear that their departure was only the first chapter in a much larger and more complex story. Gradually, they began to actively share their own interpretation of the events preceding their departure with the public. In candid interviews, they hinted at instances of unfair treatment, manifestations of racism, and indifference from the institution they had so decisively left. And although direct accusations were not voiced, the public easily guessed at whom these reproaches were directed. This was followed by a series of media projects, major contracts with leading television companies, the release of a deep documentary series on Netflix, the launch of their own podcast on Spotify, and finally the long-awaited publication of Prince Harry's memoirs. Each of these projects revealed new, previously unknown facets of their personal experience. With each new revelation, their message became increasingly clear, convincing, and insistent. It became abundantly clear that Harry and Meghan's main goal was to change the public perception of the monarchy. They sought to present a new world picture in which they appeared as misunderstood victims of circumstances, and the royal system seemed deeply flawed, inflexible, and in need of radical reform. Buckingham Palace, following its long-standing and unshakable tradition of ignoring any commotion and focusing on its duty, maintained a composed silence. However, this time the usual tactic of silence proved completely ineffective. Every new publication, every image coming from Montecito only exacerbated the already tense situation. Any statement emanating from there immediately became a major press sensation, provoking a stormy and ambiguous public reaction and inevitably dividing society into opposing camps. In the United States, public opinion largely leaned towards sympathy for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. However, in the United Kingdom, the situation was far from as unambiguous and unified. Deep divisions arose within the royal family itself, shaking its foundations. Princess Anne, whose reputation rests on a deep respect for privacy and unwavering dedication to duty, was steadfastly skeptical of the Sussexes' intentions from the very beginning. She firmly adhered to the principle that personal misfortunes and difficulties should be resolved away from the public eye and camera lenses. Her own painful experience of divorce was handled with exemplary discretion, without the slightest hint of public disclosure. Princess Anne categorically disapproved of emotional dramas and rejected any attempt to position oneself as a victim. From the very first days, she suspected that something far more complex than a simple outpouring of emotional distress lay behind Prince Harry's numerous complaints. It seemed to her that a carefully elaborated and thought-out strategy was behind it all. For this reason, she continued to closely follow the developments, driven not only by natural curiosity, but also by deep concerns about possible and far-reaching consequences. The British royal family, despite its seeming immutability stemming from its centuries-old history and deeply rooted traditions, is in fact significantly more vulnerable than is generally believed. The monarchy has steadfastly endured countless trials over the centuries: bloody wars, agonizing divorces, sensational public scandals, and even unprecedented abdications. However, the current situation presents a challenge of an entirely new, unprecedented nature, as it originates from within the dynasty itself. Two members of the royal family possessing deep knowledge of the palace's internal mechanisms and drawing on personal experiences sought to attract close public attention and radically change the world's perception of the monarchy. Even King Charles III, known for his sharp strategic thinking and unique ability to foresee the distant future, faced enormous difficulties in attempting to resolve this profound crisis. He genuinely hoped that his son, Prince Harry, would not cross a certain line, that blood family ties would prove much stronger than any public statements. Unfortunately, these expectations proved futile and were not met. In the calm before the impending storm, a deceptive tranquility enveloped the palace, creating an illusion of well-being. Outwardly, everything remained completely unchanged. Royal duties were performed in strict accordance with protocol, every gesture and every action meticulously measured. Loyal servants who had faithfully served the dynasty for many years still opened the curtains in thousands of royal chambers every morning, letting light into the majestic halls. And tea, as before, was served on immaculate silver trays with incomparable elegance and dignity. The beloved corgis of the late Queen Elizabeth II, now under the careful guardianship of King Charles III, still roamed freely through the spacious palace corridors as if nothing had changed. However, behind this impeccable exterior and the gleam of sparkling chandeliers lay a sinister reality. Something important, something fundamental, had begun to break down from within, undermining the very foundations of the monarchy. The origins of the brewing problem were discovered in one of the most securely guarded corners of the monarchical system, the Royal Archives. This institution was not merely a repository of ancient manuscripts and documents. It was a carefully guarded space, access to which was strictly limited and permitted only to a select few, the most trusted individuals. However, recently, very disturbing events had begun to occur within these walls. An unauthorized attempt to access a computer terminal was recorded, which, according to available data, had not been used since the day Queen Elizabeth II passed away. This was soon followed by a suspicious request for a specific document, with outdated credentials used for access. Initially, such incidents were perceived as minor technical glitches, common to any complex system. But behind the scenes of palace life, a sinister pattern was gradually emerging, foreshadowing an impending threat whose scale no one in the palace yet suspected. While the vast majority of the royal family and their entourage were absorbed in external attributes of power, fleeting trends, and public opinion, one individual remained indifferent to this commotion. She was distinguished by a sharp mind and an unusually developed analytical mindset. She had extensive experience managing large charitable foundations, as well as the discipline gained from military service, which gave her particular discipline and insight. Years of living under constant public scrutiny only strengthened her impeccable reputation. She possessed a rare ability to notice the smallest details that invariably escaped the attention of others. It was this exceptional perceptiveness that helped her notice a series of alarming events. Unexplained changes in official meeting schedules, clear signs of editing in digital archives, and a suddenly increased interest in confidential documents. Without losing a minute, she decided to act, addressing directly the staff responsible for the archive's security. From that moment, the carefully constructed veil of secrecy shrouding the events began to inexorably crumble. The entire chain of events leading to the revelation of the secret began with one specific document, an old letter written by Prince Philip to the Queen many years ago. It was stored in the archive like many other personal belongings of the royal couple, forming a part of their family history. However, someone had made a targeted attempt to access it, and it was by no means a random person. The request for the letter came from a very suspicious source, closely linked to the shadowy internet network known as the dark web, often used by hackers and foreign intelligence agencies for their illegal activities. The letter itself contained no sensational or compromising information. It was an ordinary, warm, and heartfelt note sent after one of the royal trips. Nevertheless, the persistence and extremely unusual methods used to gain access to this seemingly harmless document raised serious alarm and suspicion. Delving deeper into the investigation, a high-ranking individual discovered that the culprit's interests extended far beyond a single letter. They also sought to acquire confidential voice recordings, personal handwritten notes, and even strategic security plans for major royal events, such as the Queen's Jubilee and her funeral ceremony. These digital assets were supposed to be virtually impenetrable to outsiders. However, someone had been systematically and discreetly circumventing all existing security systems. Recognizing the extreme sensitivity of the situation, she decided not to share her suspicions with other family members until irrefutable evidence was obtained. Under the strictest secrecy, she enlisted a team of highly qualified cybersecurity experts, tasking them with tracking the perpetrator's digital footprints. The results of their investigations were truly astonishing. The specialists uncovered several covert email accounts that had been actively exchanging data with computers located within the palace over several months. At first glance, these accounts appeared to be fraudulent. However, the phone numbers used for their recovery painted a completely different picture. One of the discovered numbers belonged to a media expert permanently residing in Montecito. Another was linked to a former employee of Meghan Markle. But the most striking and shocking revelation was that one of the devices used for the hack had once belonged to Prince Harry during his time as a working member of the royal family. Such a coincidence could not be accidental. Everything pointed to a meticulously planned and coordinated operation. While these outrageous circumstances were being uncovered, daily life at the palace continued as usual, as if nothing extraordinary was happening. King Charles ceremoniously opened a modern, eco-friendly winery, thereby emphasizing the monarchy's commitment to innovation and sustainable development principles. Prince William, for his part, delivered an impassioned speech in Manchester, addressing the pressing issue of homelessness and calling on society for compassion and active measures. Princess Catherine's outfits, as always, consistently graced the pages of fashion magazines and social chronicles, confirming her undeniable status as a style icon. At first glance, everything appeared flawless and harmonious, yet the protagonist knew the truth, holding irrefutable evidence of an impending crisis. Behind the scenes of palace life, a carefully woven conspiracy was unfolding, and the threads of this insidious plot led to someone within the royal family's closest circles. Someone who had shared meals, celebrations, and common memories with them was at the heart of this treacherous scheme. The emails, devoid of any humanity, exuded coldness and calculation. There was no room for emotion, only dry, ruthless strategy. Once these carefully guarded secrets came to light, it would not merely cast a shadow on the family's reputation, it could undermine the very foundations of the monarchy, an institution that for centuries had symbolized stability, tradition, and immutability. The protagonist acted with striking determination, yet her demeanor remained marked by unwavering composure. No signs of panic or hysteria marred her appearance. She immediately demanded the voice recordings, setting a clear deadline: Thursday. Subsequently, taking all necessary precautions, she fortified the palace's digital defenses, conducted a meticulous analysis of security logs, and handed over all collected information directly to King Charles. And that's when the tranquility ended. The days of serenity were irrevocably gone. An inexorable storm of events was steadily gathering strength. Within the ancient royal chambers, there was a sense that secrets carried an added weight, as if possessing their own invisible mass. The walls here didn't just echo footsteps. They carefully preserved fragments of barely audible whispers carried through the centuries. Following the protagonist's astonishing discovery, the atmosphere within the palace underwent a radical transformation. Open and casual conversations ceased, replaced by short, hushed, and extremely cautious remarks. Staff no longer engaged in free-flowing conversations. Information no longer spread like casual gossip. Now it seeped out in sparse drops, like moisture seeping through the tiniest cracks in a ceiling. One day, in a quiet corridor adjacent to the archives, a whispered question sent a chilling premonition through the listener. Did you hear the archive server was shut down? For those who witnessed this moment, it became perfectly clear that something extraordinary and irreversible had occurred, and life at the palace would never be the same, entailing the most serious consequences. A small but highly skilled team of digital specialists worked tirelessly day and night to safeguard centuries-old royal secrets. Every file was meticulously sorted, securely protected, and duplicated in hidden systems. Therefore, when the quiet rumor of the main server's sudden shutdown spread through the palace, time seemed to stand still. There were no prior warnings, no messages from the technical team, not even the slightest hint from the royal court, just a suffocating silence, filled with a sense of impending doom, causing people deep anxiety and discomfort. Soon after, familiar faces began to quietly disappear. A young aide close to King Charles was discreetly reassigned to another position, with no explanation given. An employee from the communications department was suddenly granted leave, again without any stated reason. It was then that the quiet conversations began to gain momentum, turning into a growing hum. Journalists, usually possessing reliable sources within the palace, began an in-depth investigation into the circumstances, seeking to determine if a cyber attack was behind it. Within the palace walls, a true storm erupted, giving rise to a cascade of unresolved questions. Those very sources, who usually shared the most piquant and often shocking details of royal life with undisguised eagerness, were now struck by an absolute ringing silence. In the highest echelons of monarchical society, where ordinary gossip had long ceased to be mere idle chatter, transforming into an unspoken yet extraordinarily influential currency, where subtle rumors were exchanged for valuable details, and even the slightest gesture became the object of intense, sometimes obsessive attention. This sudden total silence in all circles, without exception, was perceived as an extremely unsettling and even ominous sign. Meanwhile, one of the most astute journalists observed these strange events, noticing early in the morning how a palace press officer, like a silent shadow, quickly slipped through the inner courtyard, clutching a sealed folder whose contents were undoubtedly highly confidential. Almost simultaneously, an unexpected announcement came from the princess's office. All her scheduled engagements were suddenly canceled for a full 3 days. And even Prince William, citing unforeseen scheduling issues, withdrew from a long-planned charity video, which was highly uncharacteristic for him. However, the culmination of oddities occurred somewhat later. Cleaners whose presence in the palace was usually limited to Fridays were urgently summoned in the middle of the workweek. Their usually impassive faces now expressed an unaccustomed gravity and a kind of detached aloofness, as if they had been initiated into some profound mystery beyond the comprehension of ordinary mortals. No one around could offer a coherent explanation for what was happening. In this atmosphere of escalating, almost palpable tension, Princess Anne, known for her decisive character and straightforwardness, made an unequivocal decision to take personal control of the situation. Acting with her characteristic prudence, Princess Anne did not convene numerous grand meetings that would only attract unnecessary attention, nor did she alert security to her true intentions. Instead, she went directly to someone she trusted implicitly, Elizabeth Vaughan, a modest yet exceptionally valuable member of the palace's technical staff. For over a decade and a half, Elizabeth had dedicated herself to meticulously working with the most complex royal digital systems, earning an impeccable reputation as someone incredibly loyal, extremely cautious, and absolutely reliable in all, even the most sensitive, matters of confidentiality. Therefore, when Princess Anne expressed a desire to meet with her, the choice of location for their conversation was unsurprising. It was the parade room, a hidden archival space, artfully concealed within the depths of the vast palace library. This ancient, secluded room had once served as a secure refuge for priceless royal documents during the tumultuous war years. On its walls, one could still discern faint, pale marks from antique thermometers, once used to maintain strict control over temperature and humidity, safeguarding the precious papers from the destructive effects of time. And most notably, this secluded room had never been fitted with surveillance cameras, making it an ideal location for confidential discussions. Princess Anne stepped into the archive room alone. Elizabeth was already awaiting her arrival by a massive metal table, covered with numerous documents and printouts. Complete silence reigned around them. Not a soul was in sight. Later, an insider source at the palace confirmed the meeting, emphasizing its unprecedented nature. Princess Anne, without delay, quietly closed the door behind her and immediately addressed the main issue. Her unwavering goal was to see what had been meticulously shielded from outside eyes until now. Elizabeth, without a single question, merely nodded silently in agreement and began presenting the materials. Even a figure as seasoned and composed as Princess Anne was profoundly shocked by what she saw. Elizabeth had meticulously examined data from the past 3 months and uncovered a mysterious account that had emerged almost immediately after Queen Elizabeth's passing. This account, like a ghost from days long past, utilized an outdated system bypass protocol, allowing it to subtly infiltrate past standard authentication procedures. It operated via a special configuration designed exclusively for high-ranking government officials, which should have been decommissioned long ago. However, a lost access channel named Concert Access 2017 within the system had never been fully deactivated. This secret entry quietly provided access to hidden digital archives. Instead of massive downloads or aggressive cyber attacks, the unknown perpetrator meticulously extracted single items sequentially. Among them was a private note written by Prince Philip, related to his strictly confidential meeting with Commonwealth heads of state. Digital images of the late Queen's handwritten notes concerning Charles's early reign as heir to the throne were found, as well as protocols of tense discussions within the royal family during Princess Diana's divorce proceedings. These were not merely archaic papers. They represented exceptionally private and potentially damaging information, with the potential to cause significant reputational and political harm. Meticulously examining the printouts, neatly arranged on the table surface, Princess Anne delved into each line with unwavering attention. The details emerging raised more and more questions. Particularly alarming was the precise timing of these cyber intrusions, raising deep suspicions. The mysterious digital activity was recorded directly before Meghan Markle's interview appeared in Variety magazine, and again shortly before Prince Harry's high-profile media appearance in the United States. Consumed by burning curiosity, Princess Anne asked Elizabeth to identify the true instigator of these disturbing manipulations. In response, Elizabeth, with visible hesitation, handed over a sealed envelope. Within it lay a securely protected USB drive, whose contents, it became clear, dispelled the last shadows of doubt. The discovered digital footprints pointed with undeniable accuracy to a private network located in Montecito, California. Princess Anne, deep in thought, paused for a moment, her gaze fixed on the envelope, her hands resting motionless on the cool steel table surface. When she finally broke the oppressive silence, her voice was quiet, yet it carried undeniable weight, reflecting the gravity of the moment. Elizabeth, having completed her crucial mission, received clear instructions. Discovered information was to remain strictly between them, and for the next 2 days this condition remained inviolable, guarding the secret from outside eyes. During this designated period, Princess Anne began meticulous and methodical work. Her first step was to compile a comprehensive list of all individuals who had had any access to the invaluable royal archive over the past 2 years. Names from this list were thoroughly vetted, movement and visit records meticulously cross-referenced, and gradually the circle of potential suspects began to inexorably narrow. After this comprehensive and detailed analysis, only 3 possible insiders remained at her disposal. 2 of them had already left the palace by then, but one still maintained some, albeit weak, connection to the royal residence. This individual turned out to be a highly qualified digital technology expert who, at one time, had provided invaluable assistance in developing and implementing a secure digital archive for the royal family. He was currently leading a very secluded life in North America, working as a private IT consultant on a freelance basis, far from prying eyes, but, as it turned out, not beyond the reach of justice. The palace immediately ordered an emergency internal audit of every contract that had ever been associated with this consultant. In less than 48 hours, his home address was identified, and a complete and detailed list of all electronic devices he used was obtained. However, the true shock came from a single invoice discovered in the documentation. It was marked Digital Archive Support and billed to Archwell Media, which is known to belong to Meghan and Harry. This was no longer mere unsubstantiated theory or conjecture. Now there was irrefutable and strong reason to believe that the digital breach was directly connected to someone associated with Montecito and, potentially, even with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex themselves. Despite the extreme seriousness and delicacy of the situation, information about what was happening was not disclosed to the press, nor even to most palace staff. All further actions and steps were kept in the strictest confidence, protected from any external interference. Late in the evening, a meeting took place, not in majestic Windsor or cozy Sandringham, but in the secluded and infrequently visited apartments of Clarence House. This venerable edifice, once the residence of the Queen Mother, became the silent witness to one of the most significant discussions in the recent history of the British monarchy. Inside were only His Majesty King Charles, his son Prince William, and Princess Anne. The meeting lasted just over an hour and a half. Princess Anne presented in detail all the information she had gathered with Elizabeth. The king listened with utmost concentration, not uttering a single sound. Prince William, for his part, paced steadily behind his august parent, arms crossed, his whole demeanor betraying hidden agitation. Once all the facts were presented, Anne, without embellishing the reality, openly declared the unauthorized intrusion. There was undisputed evidence indicating the involvement of an individual from the royal family's inner circle. For a few moments, a profound silence reigned. William was the first to break the silence. His voice was barely audible, as if muffled. He reiterated his previous warnings that this was just the beginning of a looming threat. King Charles was visibly shaken. One part of him was gripped by pain, but another, conversely, maintained unshakable steadfastness. He inquired about the next steps. Anne's reply was concise, but filled with firm resolve. It was time to act, with caution, but without delay. Beyond the imposing wrought iron gates of Clarence House, a deceptive calm prevailed. Several paparazzi, lurking in nearby shadows, vainly hoped to capture some movement, but their hopes remained unfulfilled. Thick, heavy drapes tightly covered the windows, securely concealing everything that transpired within. A profound nocturnal silence enveloped the surroundings. However, within these silent, historic walls, three influential members of the royal family made a momentous decision to quell a danger originating directly from their own circles. When the family members returned to their quarters at the palace, the prevailing atmosphere had undergone a radical change. Lively conversation ceased, giving way to an oppressive, almost palpable tension. The usual tranquility dissolved, and everyone sensed the imminent approach of a storm. The royal family had repeatedly faced scandalous stories concerning romantic entanglements, divorces, and high-profile resignations. But this time the situation was fundamentally different. It was not merely a matter of morals or ethics. At stake were trust, carefully guarded secrets, and highly confidential information extracted from the very heart of monarchical power and likely used for personal, self-serving interests. A silent intrusion into the royal archive. Initially, the strange occurrences in the virtual space were perceived as a minor system error. That's how they were evaluated by the technical staff when a record of unauthorized access to the royal archive was found in the system log. Notably, an account that had been inactive for several years was used for this purpose. According to regulations, such accounts are subject to deletion after 1 month of inactivity, yet for unexplained reasons, this particular account remained untouched. For over 2 years, someone had discreetly used it to gain entry. There were no signs of brute force hacking or aggressive intrusion. All actions were executed flawlessly, silently, and strangely, perfectly. It was clear that the perpetrator knew the system inside out. The initial data analysis conducted by the enlisted cybersecurity experts did not immediately raise alarm. At first glance, it appeared to be a routine set of file access requests, with each document having a correct code. However, a deeper examination of the timestamps of these requests revealed something unusual. The requests were clustered within tight timeframes and executed during off hours, suggesting a pre-prepared list of actions that was meticulously followed. Each file was accessed almost instantly after the previous one, creating the impression of an automated or extremely well-coordinated process. Princess Anne was particularly concerned not only by the unauthorized access itself, but also by the nature of the file selected. It became evident that this was not a random selection. The perpetrator specifically sought confidential documents containing emotionally charged records, important historical data, and information capable of causing reputational damage. This was a deliberate act indicating a profound knowledge of the archive's internal structure and its contents. The archive was not merely a digitized library, but a carefully guarded digital repository of the royal family's personal and secret materials. Within its depths lay secret memoranda, intimate correspondence between royal family members, confidential notes, unpublished speech drafts, and recordings of private conversations never intended for public dissemination. Of particular sensitivity were files containing emotional reports on the reaction to Princess Diana's tragic death, as well as personal emails between the Queen and her grandchildren. The archive also held early communications reflecting concerns about Meghan Markle's integration into the royal family, underscoring the sensitivity and potential danger of the stored information. The evidence was clear. What transpired was the result of a deliberate and flawlessly organized operation, not an accident. Under conditions of absolute confidentiality, an independent company specializing in digital security began a meticulous analysis of the digital footprints left in cyberspace after the recent incidents. Its funding was exclusively in cash, and the work was conducted under the strictest non-disclosure agreement. This team of highly qualified specialists, working with extreme efficiency, managed to uncover a trail in just 3 days that led to very disturbing and unexpected discoveries. During the investigation, it became evident that the unauthorized intrusion into the digital infrastructure was by no means carried out from the supposed royal palace. The epicenter of this cyber attack was successfully localized in North America. The unknown perpetrator, whose true motives remain shrouded in mystery, used sophisticated remote control software to gain full control over a computer device that had once been in the possession of a royal court employee. The aforementioned computer terminal, whose last known location was within Kensington Palace, had been inactive for over a year at the time of the attack. The perpetrator, aiming to maximally obscure their traces, skillfully moved between public Wi-Fi hotspots and masterfully concealed their digital identity by using numerous VPN services, which in turn were backed by shell companies officially registered in jurisdictions such as Delaware, British Columbia, and Los Angeles. Nevertheless, as practice shows, even the most sophisticated cybercriminals are not immune to frustrating missteps. During the thorough investigation, a virtually imperceptible digital footprint was discovered, which subsequently proved to be the crucial link in unraveling this complex and multi-layered scheme. During one active connection session, a momentary technical glitch occurred, as a result of which the outgoing signal was not timely masked. The detected signal directly pointed to a magnificent private mansion located in the exclusive and prestigious area of Montecito, California, the place the Duke and Duchess of Sussex had chosen as their new residence. In the highest echelons of power, absolute silence was preferred regarding the revealed circumstances. Even the most influential government officials remained completely unaware of what was happening. King Charles took an unwavering stance. Any action must be postponed until every single detail, no matter how insignificant, is confirmed. His Majesty had no intention of making hasty decisions based solely on conjecture, especially when the matter concerned his own son. He required not unsubstantiated assumptions, but indisputable and irrefutable evidence. While the monarch, with his characteristic prudence, preferred a strategy of watchful waiting, the princess, conversely, could no longer contain her mounting impatience. She decisively demanded immediate access to all electronic correspondence, directly related to the high-profile hacking incident. And when the printed copies of these digital communications finally landed in her hands, the content of what she read plunged her into a state of profound dismay and alarm. The content of the letters starkly differed from ordinary everyday correspondence. Every word exuded cold calculation, deliberate planning, and overt psychological manipulation. The identities of the senders and recipients were meticulously encrypted, and the servers used for exchanging messages were judiciously located in remote, offshore jurisdictions. The very language in which this correspondence was conducted more closely resembled the tenets of a meticulously drafted strategic blueprint rather than spontaneous, informal communication. One of these messages contained a truly ominous warning that once certain information was made public, nothing and no one would be able to halt the irreversible course of unfolding events. Another message featured a mysterious digital folder titled Royal Protocol, which, according to its authors, represented the sole meticulously prepared narrative designed to provide robust protection to those who orchestrated this confidential data leak. A third message unequivocally indicated that they had only a singular opportunity, and therefore all necessary documentation had to be prepared without delay, immediately upon the conclusion of a crucial telephone conversation scheduled with New York. It became evident that these were not disparate emails, but interconnected fragments of a meticulously devised and cunning strategy. All of this created a strong impression that an unknown entity was deliberately attempting to undermine and weaken the royal family from within, aptly leveraging their own secrets and vulnerabilities as potent weaponry. Leading cybersecurity specialists immediately commenced an in-depth investigation into the received data, focusing their attention on analyzing the hidden information, known as metadata, which was inseparably attached to each discovered file. In the process of thorough analysis, it was revealed that some of these messages had been sent utilizing the infrastructure of a Canadian telephone network, while others emanated from a portable computer that, as was established, had been actively employed during the Invictus Games. Of particular interest and concern was one specific email in which the entire compromising archive was clearly presented as a safety net. According to this message, in the event of any unforeseen circumstances, all files contained within the archive were to be immediately released to the media within a severely limited time frame, 24 hours. Notably, while the sender of this email utilized a fictitious name to conceal their identity, their account was intimately linked to a telephone number that, as it turned out, had previously been officially registered at the very same address in Montana.